Cheers, guys. Epix 911, welcome to the Saturday, September 9th, 2017 edition of VR News. Before we jump into the news, I want to talk about some interesting discussions from yesterday's video in the comments section. If you're new to the channel, you don't want to hear me blather, there are timestamps for every news story in the description. You can skip right on over this, get right into the news. If you're still here, I'll just take a minute or two to chat about some interesting points. The first had to do, and there's 2 points really, with the Pico style units. And if there was a danger of them saturating the market. And I used to actually think there was. And that was pre kind of VR full-on ownership and experience with the devices. That quickly turned. I no longer think that's the case. And it boils down to a couple of reasons, in my opinion. The first of those is content. You buy yourself a Pico, you go home. It's not going to take you long to discover you don't have access to the same type of experiences or games. You're also going to realize functionality-wise, you don't compare to the big three devices in terms of tracking even. So where I'm going with that is I think most people are either aware or become quickly aware that it's a tiered system. Not all VR is created equally. If you want the experience given by the big three, you need one of the big three. So yeah, I don't see that as an issue. Nobody is going to spend a big amount of time and think, oh yeah, VR is crappy because of this. If they've gotten that far and they're that into it, they're going to, like I said, quickly find out that's not the case. The other question or the other point to that was why the emphasis on resolution for these devices. And I think it kind of ties in with the first point. They can't compete. It's marketing shtick, plain and simple. Pico is a great example of that. They can't compete on content, at least not yet. They can't compete on tracking, 3 degrees of freedom versus 6. You can't do things like lean. Again, that goes back to that first point. It becomes quickly apparent. So you don't market your tracking, you don't market your content, you market the one thing that you have a clear win on, and that is resolution. Even though most of us know, and others will quickly discover, it's all a moot point if it can't deliver on those other things. And then the other thing was the horror VR experience versus horror movies. Do they still scare you? Can VR experiences desensitize you to a certain degree? And it was neat to see that there were a few others that commented that that was the case with them as well. Because I really do think that horror VR is a special thing. If you're into horror, that alone, in my opinion, even if you're not a big gaming person, is a compelling reason to get a virtual reality solution. With that said, guys, let's jump into the news. The first story has to do with the Meta 2 AR headset. David O, he's the head of developer relations at Meta, announced via their blog website the following. We are thrilled to announce that SteamVR, one of the leading VR platforms, is now supported by the Meta 2's latest 2.3 SDK release. The article goes on to say that they are going to support Vive controllers as development continues. Now, admittedly, for me, I think it's kind of cool to have a HoloLens Mini, if you will, type device alongside our VR units with SteamVR. And it'll be neat to see what this thing's capable of. Although you could argue probably successfully that even though it has a greater field of view than HoloLens, it's very akin to the argument I made in the intro. That is a moot point if it doesn't have content. And I would absolutely agree with that. Touché. That would be my concern as well there. And the next story, Xing, The Land Beyond, has had a little game update. We've talked about this game. It's been in development a hell of a long time, 3 years now. Nice to see it finally nearing completion. VR Focus were able to play the first level of the game, and here's what they said. Xing is set on an idyllic sun-drenched beach with golden sands and crystal clear blue waters. To say it all looks gorgeous is an understatement. In fact, you could just use the area as a relaxing chill-out zone, almost like some of those meditative VR apps. What's interesting is the game doesn't appear to have teleport locomotion. VR stated as much when they said with no locomotion or teleport locomotion to navigate an area in the game that had lily pads, it was almost as if the developer was challenging the player who might suffer from nausea to get nauseous. Now, I don't think they actually meant to elicit nausea in players, nor do I think it's necessarily a done deal that they're not going to launch with teleportation for those people who do suffer from it. This next story, it was interesting to me because it was another attempt by a games company to reach out to Reggie, the COO of Nintendo America, and ask about VR and see if his stance had changed. The reason I bring this up is he's been asked multiple times his opinion about virtual reality, and it's usually the same, negative. And yet we've talked on here so many times, we've said, look, negative people are negative, but then they try VR, they're usually not as negative as, before they tried it. That seems to be a pretty universal rule. So what gives with Reggie? And that kind of got me thinking, has he even ever tried virtual reality? So I started a little search. I was going through some articles like this one on VR Focus that we're talking about, where they asked Reggie. Now, initially, a couple of years back when they asked him, he said, based on what I've seen to date, it's not fun, it's not social, it's just tech. Now, you could look at that and say, based on what I've seen to date, implies he's got firsthand experience, or it could just be a general way of saying what he's seen, from others. Interviews, videos. You can't say for sure. I kind of wish they would have asked him outright, have you tried it? Now, he told Variety magazine a couple of years later, most recently at the Entertainment and Technology Summit, it's technology that we have been looking at literally tens of years. There's not a lot of experiences yet that are truly fun. So I wanted to see if I could find some definitive proof of Reggie, actually trying virtual reality. The only thing I could find was this picture. I don't need to slag on this device any more than it's been slagged throughout history. But could this be the VR that Reggie is talking about? Here's definitive proof. We know he's tried that, but we also know that freaking thing isn't really virtual reality. So if Reggie's opinion is based on that, well, the whole company's in trouble and probably is never going to get VR again. So I looked some more, couldn't find a picture of him. The Sony part makes sense. Trying a direct competitors, probably not, but Rift, Vive, a PC VR experience? Nope, couldn't find it. So I throw it back to you guys. Have you ever seen a video or a picture? And if so, let me know of Reggie doing exactly that, trying virtual reality. At this point, it's not a big news story. It's just my morbid curiosity, plain and simple. That's it, because of the negativity, wanting to understand where it's coming from. Okay, this last story, guys, gave me a pretty good chuckle as I was digging into it and researching and figuring things out. The video, let's start with that. So Pimax has a video for their upcoming 8K HMD. In that video, they show a prototype and they show a bunch of different accessories for that device. There is an eye tracking unit. There's an inside-out tracking module, a wireless transmission module, even a scent module. A Vive and Chill cooling fan combo. Yep, that's there too. And then the last two that they show, which is kind of the headband and then the straps. I'm not so sure they needed to show that because most HMDs have that. That's kind of par for the course, but fair enough. They showed off the other stuff. Based on what I've read, they're going to be opening a Kickstarter, but I thought I'd show you guys the video, let you see it, get your thoughts, because it kind of comes full circle with what we talked about at the intro. Because you could look at this and on the surface you could say, holy crap, this is a threat. Or you could look at that and say, you know what, based on what Epix was saying, yeah, the emphasis on 8K, the fact that there's no content, and a lot of this other stuff, probably nothing to worry about. We'll find out. Either way, guys, that is it for the Saturday news. Hope you guys are having a kick-arse weekend. As always, cheers, guys.